You know, I hadn't intended on being a minister at all. Having grown up in the church, I was well aware of what the education and the work would entail. I almost always attended church, but at times my relationship with the church was tenuous, and at times I would be described as not much more than an innocent bystander. In my 20s, I worked in the restaurant industry and soon moved to hotels. I loved the hustle and bustle of hotel work. At one point, I was hired as the communications manager at the Boston Park Plaza Hotel and Towers in Park Square, which was built as the Statler in the 1920s. While the hotel had seen better days, I loved it. The building was triangular, so it looked as if a huge ship had docked in Park Square. It was 1 million square feet, 15 floors, 1,300 guest rooms, and its own castle right across the street. As one of the managers in the rooms division, I was often the manager on duty for the whole hotel. Now, this wasn't as impressive as it sounds, for I wasn't ever really in charge while I was the manager on duty. I just stood in the lobby and I talked to people. The lobby itself was something to behold. It was larger than this church. It was 2 stories tall, with a gigantic crystal chandelier, a wraparound balcony, a bank of revolving doors that looked out onto Arlington Street. There was a restaurant called the Swans, which served high tea in the afternoon. There were uniformed bellmen, desk clerks, and concierges. Everything was marble and brass and gold. It was like being on the set of a Busby Berkeley movie. And so I became a lobbyist. I stood in the lobby in a gray pinstripe suit, and I watched and I waited. I stood and pointed, I gave directions, I hailed cabs, I reunited lost children with their parents, I gave out Freedom Trail maps, I recommended restaurants and theaters, solved little disputes, and I listened to complaints. All day long I heard them. Lost laundry, missed wake-up calls, rude service, slow service, a dirty bathtub, a room that smelled like smoke, a room where you couldn't smoke. I wanted a park view, I wanted a king-size bed, there's no hot water, there's no heat, there's no air conditioning. I think this was excellent preparation for the ministry. One of my favorites, which I heard more than once was, "I can't sleep in this room, the wallpaper is too loud." Each complaint had to be addressed and some amends made. I sent fruit baskets and cookie trays, I refunded money, and for major mess-ups, I offered free stays if the guests wanted to come back. Each infraction had an equal and opposite reaction. There was a large staff and the standards were very high. The management really cared about guest services, but you couldn't please all the people all the time. And some people were simply angry and simply inconsolable over the littlest things. When I was in that lobby, I felt like Aaron in the desert. And for me, the glory on the horizon was at the end of my shift when I could go home to my apartment in Dorchester, kick off my shoes, and just camp out on the couch in blissful, solitary silence. Imagine, though, what it must have been like for Moses, Aaron, and the Israelites to be out there in the desert. The complaining of the Israelites is well documented. This story takes place just after the parting of the Red Sea. God has hardly freed them from slavery, and now they're thirsty, and now they're hungry. Now they're asking Moses, "Are we there yet?" They're not bad people, but they are children, and God's got to grow them up. So God starts slow with a simple test. Can I teach them to listen to me? Can I give them a simple command with non-life-threatening consequences if they disobey? And we'll see how they do. If they do okay, I'll know they're ready for more blessings and more responsibility. Now remember, God never gives a blessing without giving some kind of responsibility. It is an equal and opposite reaction. God tells Moses, "I have food for my people. It's the perfect food, bread from heaven. But here's how it's going to work. They can only gather half a gallon per person per day. And on the sixth day, they gather twice as much, so they can rest on the seventh, just like me. Okay, go. Now, this must have been mystifying for the Israelites. In fact, when they saw this fluffy food stuff on the ground, they exclaimed, "Man who?" which roughly translates to, "What is this stuff?" and has become today's word manna. You know how it went. They didn't do so good at all. The manna was delicious, so at least they'd stop complaining about missing their Egyptian slave food, but some people complained that it wasn't as good as the leeks and the melons that they were used to. Some people hoarded this food, insurance against tomorrow, when perhaps this new God might decide to abandon them. And others gathered too little. Maybe they weren't strong enough or fast enough to get their share before it melted in the desert sun. But here are the magical properties of heavenly bread. No matter how much or how little people gathered, they all ended up with precisely the same amount, just enough. Everyone had enough. Now, they say it takes 6 weeks for humans to develop and stick to a new habit. Anybody remember how long God had to feed those Hebrews in the desert? 40 years. So I don't think we should feel bad if we don't stick to a new habit within 6 weeks. So, friends, what do you have to bring to God's complaint department today? What is it that is within you that needs healing? Is it a relationship problem? Is it a physical ailment? Is it economic? Are you weak and heavy laden? Here's the key that will unlock that. Take it to the Lord in prayer. Jesus says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble of heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." For today, dear friends, let us simply go out into the rest of the day, the rest of the week, secure in the knowledge that God's mercy is wide. Know that anything that you bring will be gracefully received in the complaint department, and know that God will rain down bread from heaven, just enough for you. Amen.